you know, allowing me to present a little bit about myself. Um, I've been, my first professional job in the United States was actually with healthcare. And the reason I bring that up is I always think that most people should start their careers in healthcare, especially in a healthcare provider system in hospitals, because you learn about every process that can be replicated in any other industry.
Yep.
And over the last 3 decades, I have worked with almost every industry, and it's much easier for me to tell you which industries I have not worked in. Airline industry, and actually I'm happy about that. And the other one is petrochemicals, but pretty much everything else, I've had a client either as a primary or as a sort of a subcontractor in that workspace. In addition to that, I've also started several tech companies and did tech startups because as if my life wasn't busy enough. So, um, but at the core of my professional career, um, operational excellence has been pretty much a consistent theme. And I've found, especially since COVID happened and the pandemic happened, a lot of the irrespective of what that area is, every industry was affected. Whether it be a supply chain issue, whether it be customer service issues, it's almost like people forgot how to do their work, right? And there was much less emphasis in essentially process. And like some of you said, Karina, you just said that you're not called, you're still doing the same job, but you're not given the name agile coach anymore. And then Bindu, you mentioned about the transitioning of how people bring in their own new people bringing in. So l- in the midst of all that, and every decade brings in a whole new language and a usual Gartner hype cycle, right? And what an exact thing is. But if you think about it, without operational excellence nothing gets delivered, right? So one of the things that I keep on harping on, especially in the tech community, in the agile space, is that if you don't think about the work processes themselves and how people interact with them, I do not know and or know where your processes are. I mean, how do you actually get around improving it? Because throwing technology at a bad process, it just generates the errors faster, right? So that's what led to over the decades, I've developed this operational maturity assessment. So let me tell you what the why is. And by the way, please, don't hesitate to ask me questions and interrupt me. I do not have every the Zoom screen in front of me, so you have to just come in and start talking, okay? Because I cannot see. And Vandana, you can interrupt me and tell me if there's a question. Is that okay?
Yes, absolutely. And folks,
Okay.
I'm seeing the screen, so feel free to poke around and send
Okay.
any information or raise your hand or whatever.
Okay. And I'm turning off the video too, just to save some bandwidth. So all of you have been leaders in your organization, so you don't have to imagine that. But everybody as a leader, you want to increase your operating margin, right? I mean, the margin is the most important thing for any business, which means, this is how much money I'm generating as revenues, and this is how much money I'm spending. And the difference between that is the operating margin, whether it is for your department, whether it is for your organization as a whole, whether it is for your, mega corporation, or you're a small business or a middle, size business, it's the same thing, right? And the more operating margin defines the valuation of the company and its business exist. So that is, one of the most important goals that top line and bottom line, you hear it all the time. The other thing is, at least in the last, 5, 10 years, and it comes in cycles, as Mary France, I'm sure, will, vouch for it. Everybody wants to scale their business, right? I mean, otherwise, why are you in it? I mean, some of us are in it, we'll get to retirement and that's that. But if you really want to do anything as a business, you want to always scale it. So if you're doing something really well, you want to take it to the next level. You see this in really well funded startups. They want to go acquire. I mean, there are two ways to scale your business: you acquire other companies, or you actually find the operating scale to do it. Another big issue, especially in the United States, is to retain talent. And although that is slowing down, I think sometimes companies, in order to manage their operating margin, they decide, you know, they can get in somebody with less experience and go through the churn and not retain talent, which is a I can we can have a whole discussion about that in another, setting. Um, Also, as a leader, people want less rework. They want less meetings as a simple thing, right? I mean, the number of meetings in the business where you're at, you can imagine how many hours of your day just goes in meetings. Um, and then, obviously, customers' orders, requirements, needs in a timely fashion. And what I call, and probably all of you know, is, this customer effort. I think that is becoming much more important metric than customer satisfaction these days. And how long does it take an actual user or a customer to navigate your systems and processes that they see the front end in order to get the answer or the solution that they're looking for? And that's where the frustration, that's where the attrition of the customer happens, and everything you know. But do you know where your organization is at? If you go and talk to your managers right now, I mean, many of you are agile coaches. When you're talking to your, process managers and others, do they know on a day-to-day basis, other than issues and all the fires that are lit up, do they know exactly where their organization is at? Or how much of a lag? They might know what happened 6 months ago. How updated are they in this process, right? So this is where the operational maturity model that I've developed. Some of you might be close to my age. How many of you have heard about CMMI models in technology? You have to give me a verbal yes
Yeah,
or
I've
no.
heard of it.
I've heard
Okay,
of it.
Me
awesome,
too.
awesome.
Yep.
So see, this is exactly that kind of capability maturity model. So CMMI, as you know, came out from Carnegie Mellon um, in the 1990s, essentially to understand technology. How mature is the technology, and they had put together a scale. So we took this and created an operational excellence maturity model. So it's really characteristics of your operational processes, work processes, customer facing ones, the core processes, and also, sort of HR processes, the support processes. So and all the operations around it. And we basically said that, you know, business leaders need to understand where they are right now and where they want to be in 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. Beyond 3 years, we'll be all dead. That's what I tell people. So that's the longest plan that you can have. And it gives a scale, and it's a very simple thing where we see this in about 100 million in revenue to 500 million revenue, that kind of a businesses, that there are no systems. It was probably a family owned business, and they have developed it over time, and then all of a sudden everybody retires in the leadership, and any kind of process thinking was never encouraged. It was very sales oriented, order oriented, thing. You get the order and you fulfill the order. So that's no system, that kind of thing. It has grown too fast. That has happened too. They've acquired, like five different acquisitions that they have made, and then all of a sudden, they don't have an integrated, aligned system across the different businesses. So that leads to that whole no system status. um, then there is this, sort of awareness. There are some, obviously this is where you guys, most of you come in, that there are some task teams, what I call agile teams. There is some implementation without Lean Six Sigma, DMAIC understanding. How many of you know about Lean Six Sigma, or how many of you are not aware of it? Because then I can define few things. Everybody's heard about Lean and Six Sigma?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes,
Yes.
from my end.
awesome. Okay, awesome. So then you understand, Demag, lack of centralized operational and process data. Um, Even like 3 years ago, I found a company where people were storing data locally on their computers, or they would actually go into the ERP system and make their own, because they liked Excel, right? And everybody was forcing them to use Tableau. So they would create their own little systems, and run their data and operations from there. And of course, there's no, if you don't have a centralized analytics system, you're not going to actually get current data. I mean, that's a fact. Um, how many of you have been in organizations where there were too many conflicting priorities?
Every organization.
Almost,
Everybody.
almost everyone.
So that is, sort of like everybody knows, that is what we want to do. So there's some awareness status for your organization, right? Then things, become a little bit better. I mean, think about, 2021 post pandemic versus, now, with the whole return to work, versus, I mean, hybrid versus, working from home. That whole transition, slowly but steadily, it is getting to a steady state. And that's when, still things are like reactive. There is a big fire, in the organization about some customer issue, and or the CFO, like, they have, I this is an example I'll just share. um, this There was this organization called TRW. They were a big client of mine, 20 years ago. They were headquartered in Cleveland. TRW was bought out by Northrop Grumman, so I can kind of share the story. But they had a brand new CFO, and we were running some projects out there, and this CTO comes running down the stairs. They had given me a little office, and knocks on my door, walks in and says, we need a project to fix the whole onboarding, like the computer accounts and everything once you're new there. um, when do you get access to Microsoft Office, blah blah blah. It's in complete fail, and this is a complete chaos, and it's taking 2 months for people to get this, that, and the other. So we need to run a project to check into it. And as soon as I started talking with everybody, what I found out was that this new CFO was the only one in the last, gosh, 5 years that had that issue. So, it's very reactive, because, when a top person, has some issues, they think it is a systemic problem. So we have a lot of situations where the organization becomes very reactive to people who shout the most, right? So leadership shouting the most, and there might not be any systemic issues at all, but there we are throwing, again, it becomes that conflicting priority. And I'm sure you've never faced that, issue. um, it's only like, when they come to us, we see it. I'm just smiling here, but um, you that's, what we call as reactive. And then we have, what we call as proactive. Personally, I've not seen an entire company reaching that level of maturity but I've seen departments or certain areas of the organization or a business unit actually achieving that proactive state and actually achieving the best in class state, right? Where employee behaviors are in sync with the process. They have eliminated a lot of, sort of the non-value added tasks. They have taken away a lot of the other things, and we sometimes, will get to that stage. But again, coming in on current state for total organization, I have not seen it. Have you guys seen any organization or business like in completion having any of the best in class or proactive stage?
No, but just lines of business or domains of teams or
Right.
groups within a large organization definitely have that level of maturity
Right.
Rini, I
in
would
my
say
experience.
companies that have lower competitors,
Right.
low, or a lot of alignment. I think in some cases, healthcare can have some of those because they get sort of into that top 10 rankings. Therefore, they focus on specialties.
Correct. In healthcare, I've seen it, certain areas, especially surgical areas, because it's very fast moving. Um, I so also it's a mindset, right? It's a question of resiliency and reliability. So the organizations that, fundamentally, is focused on being resilient in every economic environment or situation and making it a highly reliable system, because any little error is a big error, the impact is much higher. And so those types of, you're right, Mary, on the healthcare side, I see pockets of really well working processes and flows, so that's sort of the what to this question. um, as you can see, we look at end-to-end value streams, and since all of you are in agile, value streams is probably, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So order to cash is an end-to-end value stream. A customer places an order, the ultimate reconciliation of AP and AR, then the entire process is an end-to-end value stream. So probably many of you have seen value stream mapping and all those kinds of things. So it's really a fluid framework that helps you build a resilient infrastructure. Um, and by resiliency, again, to say that whatever change comes your way, the process, the underlying value stream, the people's behavior towards those changes, the ability to adapt is kind of like it's going to stand the tail of, sense of time, right? At least for 5 years, 6 years. I mean, it won't be totally disruptive. Um, I mean, people, we can have the best processes in the world, but you put bad people in good processes, you know, things can happen, right? So this is just a fluid framework. I'm not going to go through every bullet point. I'll share this presentation. I have already shared with Vandana, so she will pass it on to each of you. So the question is, when do you do this assessment? So what we do as an assessment is we use that maturity model. Then we have a set of, various survey tools and also focus groups and questions. And then we do an intensive um, value stream mapping for all the core processes, the major support process like employee, retention, from hiring to recruitment and retention process, benefits administration, the big ones. And we then calibrate the large steps in essentially both from a risk standpoint and also from a cost standpoint. Um, so before I go into all those things, I just wanted to kind of again revisit the thing is, when do you want to do such an current state operational maturity assessment? It's usually when very fast organic growth is projected, or that's the plan, especially when a financial event is going to happen. So companies, for example, have, hired us in essentially coming in where their CFOs or COOs said, in 2 years, we want to get our share value to this level. And share value depends on operating margin. And so we, because we want to be acquired or we want to, have some cash there to buy other companies. So you have a 2 years to figure this out, um, as to where the opportunities lie in sort of figuring out what's the best way to find that value. So, or we are going to grow, we are projected, we just acquired this company, and now we have to generate value. So very fast organic growth. Also, in addition to the M&A activities that I just mentioned, um, you have just got into a new market, right? Or a hospital or somebody has gone into, an entire state, right? And they have just, brought in the mix all these other hospitals, or whether it be in manufacturing, you have just acquired a different supply chain, within your supply chain, a different vendor, or you have consolidated all those folks, and you're essentially going into a completely different market in order to manage that new global workforce. Now with remote working, so when these types of major changes happen, I think it is absolutely imperative that some operational maturity assessment is done. Okay. I just cannot imagine, how people go about not doing it. Um, Usually they'll bring in, large companies like Deloitte or Accenture to do those things. In the old days, Northrop Grumman being a defense contractor, that's where I first developed this assessment and did it. Would bring in smaller businesses essentially to look at it. And the way they did was they acquired TRW, Westinghouse. I don't know if you all know about Westinghouse. Five major companies in sorry, seven major companies in 5 years, and they only after 5 years they started doing some alignment activities. So we went in there essentially assessing all these different organizations throughout the country, understanding where they are on the operational maturity, and then setting up all the projects and all the work that goes into it, um, to deliver results like every, you know um, few months. It's not like the old times when we had, waterfall methods, right? I mean, everything was done much faster, especially with agile and lean being introduced at that time. So these are the different things, I think it is very important. Sometimes new leadership has brought us in to do it because they want to kind of have to answer this first 100 days thing to their board. So they want to understand where they are. And I think this sense of where they are is a very important um, point to understand operational excellence. If you don't know where you are, it's very hard to decide where you want to go, right? So, I mean,
Question, Rini.
yes, yes.
Is that okay?
Yeah,
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 I did.
absolutely.
Yeah. So I know you couldn't see the screen, so I just had to.
Yeah,
Just going back into the previous slide, as we look at when to do,
right.
um, in based on your experience as organization introduce new technology on your products, when has been an optimum time that you've actually seen a successful assessment?
Okay, great question. So, great question. Because especially in the technology world, it's something that we constantly, people who comes from the operation world tell, technology, folks. So in my experience, and this may not be true for any of you, this is what happens. Let's say we're going to put in a new HRIS system, right? And the CTO and the CIO has uh, gone ahead and looked at all the vendors. They've selected the vendors, and then they bring in not only the system that they're going to implement and all the custom features that they're going to put in in the HRS system. They also bring in the Deloittes and the Accentures and any of these outsourcing team, right? So somebody has decided already that this technology is going to solve all of their problems, right? Nobody has looked at as to how people do their work now. But what happens next is once the vendor has been selected, an entire project plan has been put into place. Different people have been assigned to run those projects. And all of us, have played some glorified, business analyst in our lives, I'm guessing. So we are sent out, to go and talk to the users, and we get, and these days, these personas built up and all these kinds of things. So even if we are implementing plain and simple, Oracle systems, I mean, it's not plain and not simple, but you know what I mean. It's a store bought, kind of thing that is going to get customized. The BAs go out and get all these user personas and everything else. My question always, or the push has been, before even the vendor got selected, or around the time the vendor selection was happening, or whatever technology you were planning to implement, that's when an operational assessment of that end-to-end process that's going to be affected has to be assessed. Because unless we take away the non-value added steps in the process, nothing is going to really change. It'll be just a different beast to manage. Does that answer your question?
Absolutely. And I think we are more and more facing this in our current world of
Correct.
introduction of AIs,
Right.
and
Correct.
and the costs are going up without actually understanding what are we introducing, why are we introducing, without even having a base assessment.
And with the RPAs too. I mean, I see this all the time with RPAs. Um, because people. So for those, the let me define very quickly the value added. What I mean by that, and many of you probably know this already. When you've done a process map, right? Everybody does a process map, and you have all these steps. You basically take each step and you ask this question: is the customer or the end user willing to pay for this step, right? In other sense, do they care about it? Is this step something physically is happening, like data is being manipulated, or something is happening, it goes to some place where somebody will use that information, like you know physically something is happening in that step. And the third criteria is that is it actually, not rework, right? So when you take all these things, all if all three holds, then it's a value added step. It's actually a customer value added step. If one of them is missing, right, then it's not, it's considered as a non value added step. And in my lifetime, every single stream that we have assessed, there's always about 60 to about 75% of those steps do not need to be there. And this is just on paper and pencil. It's not like we have, introduced automated solutions or anything like that. Because people are used to working that way, but they don't see it that, nothing is really happening here. I'm just moving data from one end to the other. And you know about the 7 different types of lean waste, right? I mean, transportation is a waste, inventory is a waste, and then you have moving from one place to another without, anything happening to it is a waste. So all these lean waste assessment is done as part of the assessment. So the projects and the technology should be moved towards, the project should be take away as much as possible all these non-value added steps from the equation. See how technology can help in removing those steps, right? Because that's where all the money is lying. And so that's where, again, you were correctly pointing it out. It needs to be done somewhat upfront. And sometimes, Accentures of the world and other companies do that, at least with the work, value streams that they're working. But most tech companies, they'll just jump into and implement, you know, and then bring in change management towards the end, right? I'm sure you've never experienced that, but I have
No,
over and over
it's
again.
been such a perfect world, right?
Right, exactly. You know, let's not involve the change management people up front. Let's not involve any operations process thinking people up front. Let's bring them in, after we give them a technology solution. Okay, this is the way the world is going to look now. Now make it happen. So that doesn't develop a resilient organization. Does that answer your question?
Rini, who do you think the partnerships, I've been from consulting where I'm bouncing around in a lot of companies, I guess.
Right,
I see more, at least a lot of the projects that, that I go in on have at least a business case and a planned ROI. But I struggle, to me, the ROI then should become sometimes it's how did you get there? How was this return
right,
on investment model
right,
made? It's sometimes
right,
not good. So assessing it there. But then
right.
comes the trying to get them, and M&As are like this too. People buy companies for a reason, and you get to the
Right,
heart of the reason, and
exactly.
that should be the driver as you bring the company in.
Right,
But I've been through M&As where, the idea is you pull them in quickly, and people just forget why they bought them. If you
right.
bought them for a new capability, that's one of the worst. And trying to get money for change
Exactly.
management, process excellence, and things. But do you think the PMO, compliance, regulation, risk management, like where should we go to get that champion to help make that early case, in your opinion?
The most, the three biggest and the most successful projects I've had in this area, actually, my lead was the CFO, believe it or not,
Yep.
because at the end of the day, they're the ones just a finance person, not an accounting person. So there are different types of CFOs in this world. um, some finance people only come from accounting perspective, so all they are looking at is the accounting data and not valuation of the company. So and CFOs, a lot of the CTOs and the CIOs typically report to CFOs. So I think my thing has been that the CFOs can motivate the CTOs, without, because this is an assessment that has to be done at a involving the COO levels. COO, kind of they might delegate it, right, to risk management, to supply chain in manufacturing space, especially, or supply chain risk management. Um, but one of the tools that has helped me to sort of facilitate that conversation, which is not, we sometimes use it in the assessment also. How many of you have heard about failure modes and effects analysis, or FMEA?
I have.
Okay. I'll put that on the chat thread. So this is a tool that was developed in the 1940s by the military, or at least that's what I've been told, to assess. It's a subjective tool, but it really is needed to assess, some of this risk, and that's how the ROI is developed out of that. But yeah, the I think the CFO's office, it depends on how large is the organization, right? If you're looking at middle market, CFO is the best target. If you're looking at, you know a 20 billion or Fortune 100 company, then of course, you're starting at the PMO level. Does that Is that been your experience, Mary?
Yeah, I find that, at least making sure that tooling is something, I kind of put that in chat. A lot of times you get brought in to bring in a tool, and it's after, like you said, it's after all the things, or in your company you might get assigned to be that person or take on the project, but it's it's really driving, the tool is only the car. You got to get the processes and adoption and all that. But I find change
Right.
management and process the two hardest things to sell. They will get cut from the budget every time, and
Correct.
I
they're
And
key to
agree.
value realization almost every time.
Agree.
part of it is also, we have also created, I mean, this is getting to be philosophical, if you allow me to digress. Part of it is also we have created an environment, especially in publicly traded companies, um, this quarterly push, right? I mean, so everybody's just looking at numbers, what happened in the last quarter versus this quarter. And so then any kind of transformational change, you know, I think pushes them to make it very transactional change, you know, and as opposed to a transformational change. And so when it becomes a transactional change thing, I mean, all you're devoted towards is the number went up, 17. It needs to come down to 13 because last month it was 13 and this month it is 17, and we know 17 is larger than 13. So of course I'm going to, do everything in my power to bring it down to 13, because otherwise I'm, as a leader, going to look bad. And so when that kind of mindset drives, the first thing they're going to take about process, and I mean, I've had literally a CEO tell at their town hall meeting, and I'm not going to name the organization, don't let the process get in your way. Do your best to help the customers. And it essentially meant that their entire operational, what it implied was the entire operational excellence team that they had across, I mean, this is a Fortune 100 company. They pretty much went underground. They completely changed the language. They wouldn't even call it Lean Six Sigma. They made up some language to survive, because they heard what the CEO was saying was, don't let bureaucracy get in the way of, serving the customer. They interpret it as, we don't believe in process. We are not going to do anything related to process. We are not going to utter the word process, because that's what I'm going to get judged on. So yes. So mu- the sooner you can, and asking that question that Mary France said, can you show me how you got to this ROI, might lead to more conversation. Is, can we just do this, little assessment? It won't take very long, because you really need to know where you are and whether your current operations can sustain it, whatever changes you're making. If you don't have any systems in place, it's going to all fall apart, right? I mean, all of you agree with that, right?
You ever try putting the ROI out and that making that the goal? You know what I mean? Saying to somebody, all right, you're accountable now, the return on investment, we're going to put this on your goals. It's pretty interesting to see
How
how
they
many
behave.
people will commit to that. And then, can we map to it? Can we get there from here? And if not, you know,
Yep.
but it's funny.
Yep.
It's like, yeah, it's all agreement. But if somebody is the deliverable of that,
So yes. So yeah, so we kind of help. I mean, I think we've pretty much talked about all these things, and I'm not, again, not going to go through all these questions, but we ask these questions over and over again, um, and then and again you're going to have all these slides. So it's an assessment tool. We ask all these questions, we facilitate all these things. Typical deliverable, in my mind, that is really, really important, is doing the value stream and the value added analysis. As I said, is the customer willing to pay for it? Each single step on paper and pencil, nothing to do with automation, or any kind of technology. Physically, something is happening in the work step. Is it done right the first time? Because that's, if it's not done right the first time, you're going to have rework. Finding the opportunities of what the learning and skills gaps are, the principles out there. You do all these things, and it's not a it is time consuming for the people doing it, but it's not a huge time commitment on part of the people in the organization who participate in this. And now you have actually a quantified current state of organizational effectiveness, leadership, competency, all of those things put in there. And then you come up with a change management and communication plan with respect to all the projects that fit into that particular operational goal. So, for example, going back to the operational maturity, if everybody said, we are somewhere between reactive and proactive, and we really want to become a proactive organization, then these are the things that we have to put in the infrastructure for all the other projects to actually be successful. And also, it helps deploy. I mean, this also dates me. This goes back to Michael Hammer. Some of you might have heard about this management consultant guru, wrote several books on process management. And I think some of that process management and agile workflows and all those things, it is important to have a system so you actually know which processes are in statistical process control. Because if you don't reduce the variation, I mean, automation is all it will do, RPA all it will do is you will see the errors faster. I mean, that's a fact. And so that these are different things about why we want to do operational maturity you know things. um, sh- Here's an example of a project that we did. It was a order to cash value streams. So we identified, after putting the financial data in, the red was sort of the non-value added. So that's my you know uh, opportunity space, and this is how much I'm going to invest in time and money in order to take out that big red block to as much as possible, having more percentage of the green. And sometimes, for regulatory purposes, you have to have certain things, which may be a completely non-value added step from the technical definition, but it's really adds value to the business because you have to comply. So you want bigger chunks of the green and the yellow as you do these technology deployments, as you deploy AI, as you do any technology deployments going forward. Even if you're building a new product in on the user space as you're defining it, you have to actually take out the work process, all the non-value added steps as part of your requirements. You know what I mean? Like you have to think differently, not asking how do you do it, and not having this mindset in there. Just know, typical business analysts will ask the question, how do you work? Show it to me. And then they show you and they copy down all the steps, and then they basically take, for good or for bad, this is what the user wants, so I'm going to just build a system to duplicate what the user wants. And yes, you're meeting all your user acceptance testing, you're meeting the systems testing, it all passes through, but that doesn't improve the value to the business. So this is how we kind of like to encourage that we do that, even if it is small scale, or even if it's a very simple, much scaled down process, that these set of eyes look at it to understand the current state. Questions?
You said it passes the user acceptance testing, but it doesn't meet the customer's requirement?
Correct.
So
No, it
what was the
doesn't add. No, no,
definition
no, no,
of,
no.
okay,
No, let me. It passes and meets the user's requirements,
mm-hmm.
but it does not add value to the business,
Okay. So
right?
then somehow somebody did not prioritize some work. Like, why would you work on something which is not providing value in the
No,
beginning?
this is even before that. I'm saying that when you go as a BA and you're asking the question, how do you do your work?
Okay,
You're just documenting how they do their work. That doesn't
sure.
mean that their work is optimized.
Okay.
It has all kinds of issues. For example, like I remember this. This is a perfect example to share, and I'm sure many of you who have ever worked in healthcare will find this very amusing. So when worked at a when I had a real job and worked in a hospital, um, their admission discharge system, it's called the ADT systems, where a patient comes in and all that, admission information goes on and it follows the patient all the way they're discharged, right? All the clinical information, everything else. And then they had a different, um, sort of lab system. So where all the lab results were kept, all the test results, both, you know, uh, the data and everything. And in those days, this was many decades ago, the lab data would transfer into the ADT data. It would be integrated once a day at like 4 in the morning, whichever time zone they were at. And there were a lot of errors, end user errors happening, like mismatched, patients, duplicate, test results coming into all of these things. So we started doing all this assessment, like what is going on. It started with a problem. And then we're having, I still remember this meeting. There's always a guy named Frank, in all these things. So there's a guy named Frank. He's been doing his job for the last 20 years. And his job is he comes in at about 8 in the morning and he runs, these error logs, right? And he goes to, and these error logs were created, 10 years, for 10, 15 years ago. And it has different levels, assigned to it. I'm sure that's how we still generate error logs of how these integration happens. And he goes through those lists and he corrects it and what needs to be corrected, and then what doesn't need to be corrected or is not prioritized, he ignores it. And that's his job, and he's been doing it for 10, 15 years. And I looked at him and I said, have you ever looked into those error logs and seen which errors are getting generated more often than others? Like all these questions about value add, right, to the work you do, um, to the process, not value add to the business. And he thought I had five eyes, like this is his work. He's correcting it. It's not his job to see what is consistent, like remove the error completely. So that's what I'm talking about, Bindu, when I'm saying that, the BAs go out and find out, how they do their job. And typically in this situation would be, let's just keep giving him the error logs because he corrects them and he needs maybe a better system to put back his information and how long he corrects it. Let's make him better in correcting the error, but not preventing the error. And the business gets value when they prevent the error.
Exactly. So nobody's doing the root cause analysis and being
Exactly.
lean. That's what becomes when an organization is lean and works on quality. It's like, why are you getting those errors and why are you
Right.
fixing? So you should have zero errors. That should be your value.
Right. And so that's where I'm saying, like, unless we do that kind of
Yeah.
assessment as business analysts or anything else, yeah, we are meeting the user's requirement. Frank will be very happy to get a
Mhm.
better error log, right?
Mhm.
Because he has to then not manipulate, once he drops it into Excel, change columns and do all those things. He gets it exactly in the format that he wants, right? So, any other questions?
Have you ever been challenged with the fact that this operational assessment has to be a number? Do you provide a number for an assessment, or it's more about understanding your process and where
Um,
where is it that we need to do?
right. So after we have done the assessment and actually brought it down to this, customer value add percentage, and even in there was a major logistic company in Central Ohio, um, that brought us in 2 years before they got acquired. It has been there for a long time. Probably Pacer Logistics. You'll probably have seen their trucks. it's owned by some other logistics company. And in that case, we actually like fully dollarized, the value of these things, and then identified all the technology improvements, all the different things that they had to do. So there was financial numbers against each of these projects. That's the ROI that that they were Mary was talking about. But most importantly, we got them to this. Sorry, hang on. There we go. We got them to this. So we facilitate a leadership meeting based on the data that they have got. They decide where they are on this maturity model. So the leadership says, okay, we are somewhere between 2 and 3, or we are somewhere between 1 and 2. In our experience, most organizations always push themselves between 2 and 3. We typically find it that they are somewhere between 1 and 2, most organizations. Very few organizations, I mean, I've seen actually, interestingly, where Sheena works, which is in manufacturing. Um, Even in this day and age, and especially after the pandemic and all the fiascos that happened, they're more on the 0 scale right now, because they had some, they never invest a lot of money, um, in my experience, and Sheena, you can tell me, in actual good technology. So a lot of their technology is like 10, 15 years behind, 20 years behind.
Definitely. Yeah, right before COVID, we just got off of Lotus Notes. That's how bad it
There
was.
you go. There you go. I mean, the legacy, it just kills them. But the problem is, that yes, people were used to doing that, but it was like there was no process thinking behind it. They just were taught how to use a system, and
Yeah.
everybody had their own little trick that they had, to make their job faster. They had figured out some faster way of doing things, right? But it was not, there was no critical thinking to it.
Yeah,
But
absolutely. And we're
so,
actually
but
going through a SAP implementation, and
oh,
they're
wonderful.
trying to look at the process first, and then, like you
Hmm.
said, OTC and such.
Right.
And it's a new way of thinking, and people are struggling because they're not used to thinking process first before system.
Right. And probably, I mean, the other thing that challenge you're going to face is the loaded word of, value added. I mean, I still remember, like, we like the 4 walls, the day when we all met and did it not on mural but actually in person, was plastered with post-it notes of process steps and things like that. And the guy who was in charge, we did this value added analysis, and I kept on saying over and over again, it is the steps value, not the people. It's not like you're adding value. And at the end, he was so shocked that literally 85% of the steps could come out of the system, you know? And he just said, I cannot believe that this is true. And apparently, I'm not adding value to this organization. And he just left the room. So you have to ease people in, let's put it that way. But does that answer original question, Vandana?
Yes, absolutely,
Okay.
because I think that is one of the pet peeves sometimes that we see. I wouldn't say a pet peeve, but also a challenge when people look at numbers and they're trying to compare, but I see what we are trying to deliver. Real
Right.
quick on a time check, folks, and I
Yes.
just want to be mindful of everybody's time. It's 1:03. Options to stay a little longer and talk, but I just want to open up for any other questions.
In Vandana, I'll take a quick picture or screenshot of all of us if we can all come on camera
Yeah.
for just
Let
a
me
quick 10
stop
second. That would
sharing.
be lovely.
Yep. Absolutely.
If it's okay with everybody.
Yep. Let me start the video.
Sheena, if you want to come on camera. Oh, there she is. She's got a beautiful picture. There you go. Okay, smile. Okay, I captured it.
Awesome.
Thanks,
Well,
Bindu.
yep. Thank you, Bindu. So, folks and Rini, I don't know what your time is like, but I, this was so well needed and would love to actually kind of digress into it a little bit more. It, there is a lot of curiosity that has come up. But thank you, Bindu. Thank you so much for offering this time. And just pausing for any questions, anything that you folks want to share.
It was great. Thank you.
Well, if you have any questions, I put my email in there. I'm on LinkedIn, and Vandana, if you send me the recording MP4, I'll put it on Zettabytes YouTube because that's the only channel I have. I don't have it for my company, and then I'll send you a link so you can send it around and post it.
Absolutely. Yep. So
And
thank you
let me
so much. Yep. Thank you so much. I will send you the recording as soon as it's completed, as soon as we end this call.
absolutely.
And and the PDF, I guess, if it's okay, I'm going to share it
Yeah,
with
please,
the
please.
group.
Yeah,
Okay.
your entire Columbus group. I'll be happy to
Mhm.
answer any questions. And
Yep.
if anybody has more curiosity for their organization, I mean, there's much more details. I went at a very high level, obviously, um, but it's very doable. Let's just put it this way: for any organization that you meet, and it it sounds huge, but it's so much helpful. The first couple of months to do that before you do like SAP implementation or anything like that. I mean, it is extremely important to do such an assessment. Okay.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you,
Thank
Zettabytes.
you.
Thank you,
Thank
Rini.
you.
Yep.
Have a great
Bye.
afternoon, everybody. Bye-bye.
Yep. Have a
Bye.
wonderful lunch. Thanks.
Thank
Bye.
you.